I am Andree Duggan of the Lafayette Historical Oral History Project, talking with Wendell Pleis on May 21st, 2021. What is your full name and the spelling?
Okay, Wendell G. Pleis. That's the spelling Wendell G. Point Pleis, Pleis.
And do you have a nickname?
I got several. I'm not sure. In the service, when I was in the Air Force, I got the name of John. That's another story. But and then when I was growing up in my hometown, I was Butch.
Nice. When and where were you born?
Born in Fairbury, Nebraska, 1929, on December 13th.
And how long have you lived in Lafayette?
Since 1964. Well, Lafayette, 1966. We moved to California in 1964.
Okay, great. How old were you when you came here? Do you recall?
I was 34 when I came to California. I was 34.
And in Lafayette, where did you live when you first moved here, and where do you live now, if you could provide the street addresses?
Same place. We've lived in this house for 55 years since April. So we lived in Lafayette Valley Estates. Okay.
All right.
Since '66.
Is there a street address?
What?
They're asking if there is a street address.
Yeah, it's 3353 Betty Lane.
All right. Do you have brothers or sisters?
I have, right now I only have one sister that's still alive that lives in Montana. I had six siblings. I had two brothers and four sisters. As I say, I only have one sister left that's still living, and I was the youngest in the family of seven.
What was that like growing up in Nebraska?
That was quite an experience because of the 30s during the Depression, and we. Of course, like all the other people, lived on a farm. Most of us, at that time in history, was living on a farm, and it was really everybody was doing their very best to survive the things that took place. That was about the same time of the big dust storms in Oklahoma and Texas. And we got part of that because we lived in the western part of, I shouldn't say western, with more eastern and southern part of Nebraska, which we got part of that dust storm. So that was a miserable thing. And then also for some reason, the grasshoppers were also a big threat for crops. And then also lack of rain, which is happening in California now, of course. But so it's hard to maintain, survival back in the 30s because of in 1929, the year I was born, that was the stock market crash and started the Depression, and so it was kind of an interesting lifestyle at that time. And luckily, living on the farm. You could raise your own crops and have your own chickens and whatever deal. So most of the farmers did a pretty good job of surviving that way. And also going to one-room school at that time. Yeah, everybody went to one school on the farm, and of course that was an educational thing for that took place in history at that time,
Yeah. Tell us about your transition to service. Was that during World War II?
The Air Force, you mean?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that was the Korean War thing. That everybody during that period of time in history, you got to have those wars. No matter what. And so that came along just as I finished junior college. I went to junior college in my hometown. Nobody really had the money to go off someplace. You had to live at home, and hopefully you get an education. At that time, there was, everybody survived by, I guess you'd call it, whatever they can do. And so the draft board, of course, was always on your neck. As soon as you turn 20 or 21 or whatever it is. And so it's either being drafted or join the Navy or the Army or whatever it is, Air Force. So I chose to join the Air Force after junior college. And that was good because you couldn't join at that time because everybody was joining the Air Force. And they put a restriction that you had to have 2 years of college to join, and I was lucky enough to have that. And so I was able to get in the Air Force. And then also, the good thing was you got the GI Bill, which you could finish college after you got out. So that was a very good thing for most of us. And most of us could not go to college in that time of period. Even though, I know our valedictorian of the class couldn't go, so he joined the Air Force too, because he didn't have the money to support himself for room and board. But so that was a period of time when what took place. Your life was controlled by circumstances, like most of the time, even though we didn't think about it that way. But my service career was that I got lucky enough to had enough mathematics to get into electronics, and I was sent to electronics school in the service. Not only in the States, but I did get to Germany and get schooling in high frequency devices and microwave systems. And so my education was really in the field of electronics, started back in the service, and that was kind of a lucky thing. And so I spent 3 years in Europe with a photocon squadron that in France and in Germany, and of course had all the pleasures of all the advantages of being in Europe instead of Korea, and getting shot at, I guess you'd call it. But that was a very lucky part on my part, or I should say the Air Force part, that I got there. But all the details of how I got there is another story. But
Sure.
Nevertheless, that's the way I ended up, and benefited from not only the education in the up-and-coming electronics, but also in the ability to learn and enjoy the European system of things after the war. So this was, I got to Germany, and it was 1952, January of 1952, and that was in Wiesbaden, Germany, for a while. So that was very beneficial to be able to tour that part of the country, and then also stationed in France near.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and it was a lucky thing on my part. Not my part, but for me, I put it that way. Lucky that lucked out
Yes.
to do that. And
okay, now,
yeah, and
what do you remember about? Why did you choose to move to Lafayette? Let's say fast forward And feel free to fill in any blanks in terms of what happened between that time in Europe and when you arrived in Lafayette, and what brought you here.
Well, after I got out of service, the same day that I got discharged, I registered for a class in University of Nebraska to finish my college because I had the GI Bill, and I wanted to, of course, teach, be a teacher when I was out of high school. That would have been in '48. I investigated being a teacher at that time, and my main interest was to teach kids trades like the electronics, of course, which was up and coming in the 50s, as we all know. Not many people really realized that, but it was right in my face all the time that what was coming up in the future, which we know now, but I realized that would be a up and coming things for kids to do and need to know, and so I took engineering courses, quite a few engineering courses, but I also had all this background in electronics. So when I was taking mechanical engineering and also drafting and all the courses at Nebraska to bolster my more knowledge of the technical world that we live in, and then I did my graduate work along that line too at Colorado, northeastern Colorado. I did my master's degree there because I was teaching in the panhandle of Nebraska at the time, and it was only 150 miles to the college. So I spent 4 summers every summer at university to complete my master's degree in the mechanical world, I guess you'd call it, which is still a very important part of life.
Yes.
And I wanted to teach that part of the world because I benefited a great deal from that, and wanted to share that with the kids that's coming up, which I think probably benefited a lot of kids. And by the way, getting feedback from that, I have had that experience of getting a few feedbacks of what some of the kids did accomplish when I went to the 50th high school reunion at that the kids, some of the kids I taught, and that was a real fun thing to do.
Wow! So you did you come to get your teaching certificate and come to Lafayette to teach?
Okay, no. Here's I got my teaching credential in Nebraska. Taught 7 years in the Panhandle of Nebraska, a town called Scottsbluff, Nebraska, and that was my first 7 years of teaching out of University of Nebraska. I also coached junior college football, help coach. I was a line coach for junior college football in that particular town because I had played football in college as well as in the Air Force. I played 4 years of football in the Air Force as a pastime for fun, and that was, at that time, it was very interesting to do just that.
Wow!
And as another activity that you take part in to get the most out of life. The more you do, the more I guess you say you get out of life. As far as I'm concerned. And so I was able to help out with their football program in the junior college level. And then when I came out here, I also coached football at Campolindo for about 5 years before I went to Valle and coached football there and baseball. And then also Acalanes, I coached football for 3 years, and then also coach golf the last few years before I retired at Acalanes. But I came out here because the change factor of working in a school where I started an electronics program at Scottsbluff, Nebraska, and when I tried to expand, the principal and I disagreed on the importance of electronics. He felt that it wasn't going in place, and I disagreed, and I knew that California was very aggressive in regards to electronics, which I knew, and that was about the time transistors popped up and everything was really changing in a big way, not to mention what came later, but it's a very interesting thing that, it was hard to adapt by people what could happen in the field of electronics, which we all know,
right?
The progress. But at that time, I knew that I was more or less at a standstill, and so I was lucky enough that I had an in here in California because I had a brother-in-law that was teaching out here, and he mentioned that Campolindo had an opening for teachers, and so when I flew out to interview, I knew probably this was the best place to be.
Now, at that time, was Campolindo serving both Lafayette and Moraga?
At that time, that would have been in '64, and they were serving mostly over here in Burton Valley, and they were serving probably part of Moraga, mostly Moraga. Miramani was taking care of Orinda at that time, more or less, and so they had only opened about 2 years before I got here, if I remember right. Right in there, a school was copied after Del Valle because they had to expand. They were even trying to expand another high school that was in Orinda. It would be on the north side of the freeway. They bought land to have another high school, but they realized the population of the kids dropped a little bit, and so consequently they abandoned the idea to build that other high school. And then they finally ended up closing Del Valle because of the population again, and young people dropped. And that's where I was at the time because my kids were playing sports. My 3 sons were playing sports. I didn't want to coach against them, and that's why I transferred from Campolindo to Del Valle, because that's where they changed the borders from our area to go to Del Valle.
Very good. Let me just interrupt you here for 1 minute so that we can find out the name of your wife and your children.
Okay. Wife is Gloria. That first name, and of course my sons. I had 3 sons. One was Mitchell, and Matthew, and then Mark. Those were we had to get those ends all straightened out, So anyway, it was Mitchell, Matthew, and Mark. Okay, and and they were good athletes. And Mitchell went to Stanford and played football for Bill Walsh, and Matthew went to Cal, played football for I forget the coach, White, I think, and then Mark went to Washington State and played football for Washington State.
So they grew up in Lafayette, your family?
They grew up in most in Lafayette, and as I say, in the same house we're living in right now.
Do they
in
still
Lafayette.
live in the area?
No. Matthew, well, first of all, Mitch lives in Sacramento, and Matthew lives in Washington State, and then the young son lives down in Danville.
Okay, nice. Do you have any grandchildren?
I have 10 grandchildren, and one's 36. The oldest one's 36, and he was a Navy pilot in the Navy, and awarded quite a few awards. He was awarded Outstanding Fighter Pilot in 2014, and also awarded the most combat missions over Afghanistan and in Syria.
Wow.
So that was the oldest one. And then
you must be proud of him.
Oh, very proud. He graduated from the Naval Academy in 2007. It was. Okay.
And then do you have any great-grandchildren?
Yes, we have right now 7 and 1 on the way, great-grandkid. We only have one great-granddaughter, and the other boys, all of them are boys. But anyway, so that we have 7 and 1 on the way, which
will be 8.
Yeah.
Did you and your wife meet here in Lafayette?
Pardon?
Did you and your wife meet here in Lafayette?
No, that she's a hometown girl, from that's a story in itself. It was kind of a funny situation when I left Europe. We were supposed to get back by Christmas it would have been the Christmas of '54, and but it turned out that I had got a serious injury in football. I got a chipped bone in my back, and I had to wear a cast, so I couldn't make it. Ooh. I got back to New Jersey to get the cast off, and then so I couldn't make it back by Christmas. But they had scheduled me to be discharged in Lincoln, Nebraska, where the University of Nebraska was, and so when I ended up there and got my cast off and everything, and I was had done some things before that, but I registered for class the day I get discharged in Lincoln. That would have been 55 of January, and I went home and I did a lot of things in Lincoln, getting things set up, housing and so on and so forth. But I got home at 9:00, and I got a phone call from a friend who was having a housewarming out at the out in the country, and wanted me to come out. And I kept arguing with him, and that I wouldn't. I got too many things to do. So finally, I said, "Okay, I'll come out." So I came out, and there was my future wife sitting on the floor, which I knew from a little girl that I saw across the street from one of my friends. And I said, "Yeah, I remember you." And then 9 months later, we got married. So I brag about my efficiency. Not only did I get a discharge, register for class, get the housing, meet my wife, all in one day. Now, you can't get more efficient than that.
I love it. All right, now we can flash forward again, back to Lafayette, and you are now, you became a teacher in electronics of some type, you're going to tell me, but you also did all the coaching. So how did that go, and how long were you a teacher?
Okay, well, it started at, as I say, Campolindo. I started a program there in electronics, and I also taught metal shop for kids that they wanted that, because I did have that engineering experience. So I did do that, and then I taught mathematics too because I also had to have math. And so I taught math, electronics, metal shop. And then, as I say, I transferred over in Del Valle because the kids, I didn't want to coach against them. And the thing was that they had electronics program, and so I took over the electronics program and taught mathematics and electronics and coached football as well as baseball. But what took place then was that I did that to set up the deal. Now, the radio station really started, which a little bit, it started at Del Valle. I had one student who was really, well, more than one, I guess you'd say. And I used to teach ham operating, too, for the kids during lunch hour. They'd come in and I'd teach them Morse code and also the importance of knowing a little bit about electronics. So it was kind of a man-made factor that radio was very important at that time. And everybody wanted a radio station. Clayton Valley had one at that time, and I used to talk to the guy out there. And so we did have a couple of kids that were really involved in that, wanting a radio station. And anyway, so it evolved at that point. And then we had almost everything set up by the FCC to have a radio station at Del Valle. But we did all the paperwork and all the, was a lot of work. And a couple of kids really did do a good job in getting it. I just had the rules and regulations of what we had to do, and they did a lot of it, paperwork in a sense of what government requires for that. And then what happened was they closed Del Valle, and which messed everything up because the location is very important in regards to the radiation of radio stations. So that was out the window. And then, of course, as I say, I ended up at Acalanes. And then one of the kids came over from that, and he kept saying that we needed to do it. So then we had to redo that. And it was a lot of conversations with the FCC on the phone and paperwork and all that stuff to get back on track if we really wanted to. Also, we had to bring towers and everything else from Del Valle to put on top of the buildings so that we could have an antenna that would radiate our station. And so that had to be done also. So
I have a question. You have at Acalanes, the way it's situated, you have that big hill in front of Acalanes. Was that a problem in terms of the tower and getting?
Yeah, it was. We had to do a lot of paperwork in terms of getting people to move that over. And by the way, the district was very good about that. They had the maintenance people do that. It was not an easy job, by no means, to get that. We also had a ham station, I have to admit, that we contacted South America and Japan and all that, which was part of the tower thing, too, because we had that, too. Not only the radio station at Acalanes, but we also had the ham station for a while. We had two kids that already were hams. I wish I could remember their names. I can't help you on that one. But they came up and really worked the ham station and did a good job. And so it was good for the kids to do that. Be part of that.
Tell me about the radio station, and was it a talk radio, or what was your vision for what that would be, and how long did it last?
Well, it was music, mostly music, and their kind of music. You know what I mean? at that time. And then also it did have, the teachers used the radio station sometime to have a student out of their class come up and at our radio station, and then in their class they'd have a radio, and then the student would read what they wrote over the air. Now the parents could listen to it too, of course. We did get on cable, and if parents wanted to, we could hook them up with cable, a radio with cable, and they could get the radio station too.
Oh, was that in the early 80s or so?
That was in the 80s, right?
Yeah, interesting. So now you remind me again when so Acalanes, when did you switch over to Acalanes? Do you remember the year? And
okay, I went over when Valle closed in that would have been 78. I went to Acalanes and transferred over there to teach mathematics. My first year was just teaching math, but the principal at that time wanted to get a radio class, not a radio class, but a electronics class. Mm-hmm. They never had one, so they asked me to create a electronic class, which I did. Mm-hmm. And I don't know the year. It would be probably around, I'd say 81. We created this electronic class for Acalanes. They never had one before. It was taken over. The electronic class took the place of a craft class that was there, and the guy retired, and so the building, the room, I should say, was idle. I guess they were vacant, so that was an ideal situation, and that's why they wanted it. But that's how I got involved at Acalanes teaching electronics. And, of course, the radio station just evolved from the fact that we had students at Valle that was still involved in that. The boy name was Mark Jeffries, who was really a driver in that area because he was at Acalanes. And so he was a big game player on that. But, it just evolved. There was a lot of technical things that had to be done. Of course, all the paperwork that was involved by the FCC and so on. So it took a little time, and there's a lot of stories with kids of what they did do. I have one student that went to St. Mary's, and a girl, Elaine, I can't think of the name. I'll look it up maybe if you want. But anyway, I had a student that went to St. Mary's, got to be the manager of the radio station over here at St. Mary's College. And then she ended up in San Francisco being the manager in one of the radio stations at San Francisco, Coit, I think the name was.
Nice.
But they did do something in broadcasting, some of the kids. And electronics, of course, a lot of the kids got involved with electronics in some way. That was in the club, the radio club, and whatever.
Mm-hmm. Do you recall how long the radio club and the radio station lasted, and were you involved the whole time?
Yes, it started really, as I say, in about 81, really on the air. Let me see if I have any dates on that. I don't know if I have any dates, but it was right at that time. I would say that's pretty close. And then it lasted until 93. I retired, and then I think they had it one more year, but then whoever was trying to manage it probably couldn't take care of it. So it stopped broadcasting probably right at 94.
Yes. And do you recall how far your signal went in Lafayette?
Yes, well, it was. Now that's a very interesting thing because you see, cable, it would have went all the way to Berkeley and back again in every place. But and anybody that was connected to it could get it. The in on air thing was patchy. We were working on trying to expand that by getting our antenna higher up on hills. Now there's a hill up there. I'm trying to think. It's called Dottie Hill. I don't know if that's familiar with you. If you went east of Acalanes High School, there's a hill. As you go on the freeway toward from Lafayette to Waller Creek, there's a big overpass that you go under, and they always had advertisements of some sort up there, But up to the left of that is a real tall hill. I investigated getting a tower up on that hill so that we could cover more area. But the way it worked, because Acalanes was down in a valley, it would just cover, we'll say, up through the valley of Lafayette, we'll say down to, Rossmore got it, for example. Rossmore would get the signal, and then, so the radiation was very patchy because of the down in the valley,
Yes.
you see.
Yes.
And so we were working on trying to get our system up to the Dottie Hill, we called it. And I talked to the guy. She lived up there on that hill, and she had a lot of towers up there. That's part of her income, I guess it was, because it would have cost us $50 a month to have our one of our antennas up there on the top of that hill.
Now, you were saying Dottie Hill. Was Dottie the one who had the...
Yeah, Dottie, that was her name. That's an interesting story, too. Dottie was quite an interesting person. Her husband was a sailor, and she was also in the earthquake of the 03 earthquake or 06, I forget, in San Francisco. 06. Anyway, she was in that, and she told the story about her moving to Berkeley and watch a fire of San Francisco, which was very interesting.
Wow.
And her husband was a sailor for the Boer War, and I don't know if you know much about Boer War, but that was the situation where England was fighting down in South Africa, that was fighting the Boer, would say, with the Dutch people. They were actually the Dutch people that settled Africa before that, you see. And so the British was having a war with them. So her husband was a sailor to take the English people down to the Boer War. Now, there's a good story about Churchill being a reporter during the Boer War. Now, I know this might be off the subject here, but
I think we are. I have to ask you some more Lafayette
but all
questions.
of that is very interesting. When you meet people, of course, you don't know what you're going to get.
Exactly.
And probably the same way when you're talking to me, you don't know what you're going to get.
Let's get back to your memories of Lafayette when you first arrived. What was it like here? How has it changed? And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I tell you what, it was a cute little town. Well, I loved it. That's why we did rent a house when we first moved out in and kind of by Pleasant Hill. And we only were there about 2 years before we bought a house here. And the other thing is schools. Our kids were growing up, and so we knew that they had good schools in this area, so that's why we bought in Lafayette Valley State. The other thing, the price was right at the time for us, and that a teacher, you got to watch that budget, and so anyway, So it was just a great place, we thought, and it still is, as far as we're concerned. And that's why we're not moving. Is that we love it, and at that time we knew, that and it's really grown, like the Park Hotel, that was a lumber yard at one time, and all the stores that came up since that we moved in. Of course, there's been a lot of buildings of apartment houses.
Yes.
In Lafayette, a lot of apartment houses, since then. It was, of course, the expansion, is amazing as far as I'm concerned. And I was glad to see that Lafayette set the rule of the height of the building.
Sure.
I don't know if that's changed or not, but it used to be, so many stories, which made it like a little town. The Main Street down. So I think it represented, as far as I'm concerned, and I think we concerned, was kind of a small town atmosphere there.
Yes, and it, it still has that feel.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite things to do in the area?
Well, I do a lot of woodworking. And golf. But my woodworking is a great hobby of mine. I make furniture for the grandkids or whatever they want, and in that regards, I make a lot of little things that they may want, like desks or nightstands or tables or anything that they would like to have.
That's wonderful.
And I did a lot of cabinet making for my kids when they bought a house, and I remodeled the kitchen. Or I made railings for my son up in Washington. They built a house, and I did the railing for all their stairs and stuff like that. I took them up there and then put them in, installed things, made secret doors, and all that stuff. It's just fun. A fun thing, hobby. That's all it is. It's a fun hobby to do for me. I've always liked woodworking. It's unlimited in terms of what you can do with wood. You couldn't get as original or creative as you want to in woodworking, and all the different. Now with a tremendous amount of choices of wood now, you can make the latest project. I made a chess table for my granddaughter who just got married last summer, and they just picked it up not too long ago, came down and got it, and that was just one thing. But that was the latest thing I did for them. And
that's great. What is the secret to your vim and vigor and youthful outlook?
I have no idea. I think genetics have a lot to do with what people do. I'm a big believer of that. And of course, experience, observation of what people do and don't do, and the dumb things that they do and don't do. I guess you'd say observation. What works and doesn't work. It's just too bad that we all can't learn enough to not make the same mistake twice. But I think it just. I feel I probably was born with that, and I go with it. What works for me, and family, and knowing responsibilities, by the way. Very important to know your role in your whole community and your family, your role. we all play a role, as you well know, and also try to, before you make a decision, get all the facts you can possibly get before you make a decision of any kind. What is true, what not is true, and that's the most difficult time of life, is really to decipher what is a truth of that. So I think all of that, is you work at it. You work at it daily.
I can see why you were a good coach and a good husband, father, grandfather, great-grandfather. I think you're a very wise person, and you've brought a lot of positive things to the people around you in the area.
Well, as I say, I know there's this Dr. Phil on the radio or television I've caught a couple of times, and there was two things I got from him. And one thing, it was, what were you thinking? And the other thing, is it working? So I think those are two things that if you really put it together, maybe simple as you can possibly put it, that works sometimes to say, is it really working? And if it isn't, you better do something about it. So,
yeah, anyway. I like that a lot. Well, I think we are up to time here. I also don't want to overstay my welcome. I know it's a bit, tiring talking so long. But I so appreciate. Is there anything else that you would like to say before we end the session today?
Well, not really. I'm just saying that we have a great life. Gloria and I really enjoy life in Lafayette, and we hopefully made the best of it as we go through the rest of our life, enjoying it, and that's I think the most important thing at this time is that how you adapt to aging factor and changing the virus and all that, what you can do. So I think in the bottom line is, I guess you'd say, you stay on course of what you believe is the best way to run your life. And you never, once it works, and sure, there's adapting. You've got to, I think that works for us, and that's about it,
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, thank you. And if you have any photos, you've been a great help in supporting this project. And if you have any photos or memorabilia that you would like the Lafayette Historical Society to review or copy, please let us know. We're more than happy to. We have the archives and the space at the library. So just keep that in mind.
Okay.
And you can contact us and let us know.
Yeah, I think Nancy Flood still works for you guys down there.
Mm-hmm.
And if we have something like that, Gloria's a good friend of Nancy's, and they talk. So if we have anything to add to it, I think Mike, who did the history on the radio station, probably has a lot of photos.
Okay.
I think he copied a lot of things.
Okay.
So that would be one thing that he did.
And if you have a family photo of yourself, that would be nice to go along with this interview, or a photo of you and your wife.
We have a great big, on our 60th wedding anniversary, we have a portrait of our whole family. I don't know if that would be...
That would be wonderful, yes.
We could probably give that to Nancy to take. It's in a big frame. I don't know how you could work that, but nevertheless.
Maybe we could take a photo of the photo.
Yeah, maybe you could do that. But anyway, maybe we could work that out. I'll talk to Gloria about that, and we'll see if we could. If you think that would be part of this.
Yeah, I do. I think that would be very nice to have.
Okay.
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 Well, and
All right.
I appreciate the time, and we will be in touch when we have this finished, and it will go into the Oral History Project on the Lafayette Historical Society website.
Okay. Well, I was wondering where that would go, but we'll see what happens. Okay. All right. Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.